Start the recording. And welcome to Adulting 101, Meals on a Budget. Thank you everyone for coming along. It's great to see some familiar names in our attendance. Today we're going to have a chat with you about meals and budgeting and how you can combine those two and have some good quality nutritious meals while maintaining and staying on a budget and maintaining your other costs that are associated with adulting. So before I get started, I would like to obviously do an acknowledgement of country. So the University of Melbourne acknowledges the traditional owners on which our campuses are situated. We pay our respects to the elders, both past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Australians who have made a contribution to the life of the university community. Now, for those of you that are new, welcome to Adulting 101. This is a short 5-episode series that we're running to provide a little bit more support on areas that students have recognised they would like additional resources and additional knowledge on. So we have already run some sessions on stress management, budgeting, time management. We're now doing meals on a budget, and then next week we will do one on communication. So if you missed out on any of the previous ones, feel free to jump onto our YouTube channel and you can have a look through those webinars and catch up on where you missed out, but then also make sure you jump on and register for the communication one. And we will definitely look forward to having you there. So to kick us off, if everyone can bring up your little chat box, this is where you'll get to jump in and provide some answers. So the first question I want to put to you to brainstorm is, why is meal budgeting important? So I'll give you a couple minutes, pop your answers in the chat about why you think meal budgeting is important, and we will see what we can come up with. Perfect. So we got our first one here. Meal budgeting is important so I can maintain costs. Absolutely. So as we said, there's a lot of costs involved with being an adult. You have rent, you have school fees, you have food fees, utilities. Maintaining a budget for your meals will help you being able to afford all the other costs associated. Awesome. Another one we have here is nutritious meals. So I'm assuming it's important to budget so that you can have not only food, but have nutritious food while eating. What other ones do we have? Awesome. So that I have money to go out and party. Yes. Very important. So making sure that you've budgeted your meals so that you're not spending all your money on food, but so you can have some money left over to go out and party or to pay for school textbooks or to pay for stuff that you need as well. So what we might do, thanks for those couple of questions. I might pop on to, oh, I popped the same question. My bad. So now we've established why is meal budgeting important. I want to ask you, what does meal budgeting look like to you? So I'll pop the question in the chat for everyone to see. And I'll give you a couple of minutes. If I said to you, what is meal budgeting? What does that mean to you? Pop in some answers and let's see what you can come up with. Awesome. Not spending a lot of money on Uber Eats. Yes. Yep. Meal budgeting would definitely be making sure that you spend the right amount of money on the right amount of food. Buying groceries instead of eating out. Absolutely. So again, just looking at what you're spending money on and maybe spending money on stuff that you can make lunches with, dinners with, and make multiple meals out of instead of spending on takeout food that then has delivery costs and higher costs with it. Knowing what I'm going to eat for the week. Yes, absolutely. So meal budgeting is knowing what foods you've got coming up. You've planned it out. You've brought the right amount of food. That goes in with the next one, so I can buy in bulk. You've brought the right amount of food that you have, and then as our little picture on the screen shows, you've portioned that out and allowed yourself to make say 10 meals or 5 meals out of your ingredients, which then allows you to budget for the week because you know how much you've spent on food, and then you can plan out other costs. Absolutely. So what we might do, so we just want to get you thinking about meals on a budget. What is meal budgeting? Why is meal budgeting important? And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring on a guest speaker who we've got here today to have a chat with you about meal budgeting, about nutritious foods, about health with your gut and stomach, and cover a whole bunch of information that you might not have known and that will aid you when you're doing your meals on a budget. So I would like to welcome to the screen, if you want to pop your camera on, we have the lovely Djamila with us. Thank you so much, Djamila, for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Jessie.
Absolutely. So, Djamila, what I might get you to do, for everyone's knowledge, Djamila is a PhD candidate with the Melbourne School of Psychological Sciences. So if I could get you, Djamila, just to give everyone a bit of background about yourself, why this interests you, what you're focusing on at the moment, and then I'll let you take it away with your presentation.
Sure thing. So my name is Djamila and I'm a third-year PhD candidate within the School of Psychological Sciences. And you might be wondering why someone from a psych background is here to talk about sort of nutrition and how to eat on a budget. But in fact, sort of my focus area of research is looking at nutritional psychiatry, and that's something I'll get on a little bit later in the presentation, but it's sort of thinking about how what we eat can affect our mental well-being and how we feel. And this is something that's really interesting to me, and I'm very passionate about this. And I think only now sort of increasingly sort of aware, like people are only now aware of this area of research. So I'm sort of passionate about informing people about it. And I'm not going to reveal too much more just now, but I wanted to just say that if you have any questions at any point, do put them into the chat, and I'll get to them later at the end if there's time. But yeah, maybe I'll get started now, Jessie, if that's okay.
Absolutely. The stage is yours.
Thank you. So I'm just going to share my screen. Please do let me know if you can see that. Is that all good?
Yep, that's coming up.
Great. Thank you. I really liked some of the points that were raised just then about sort of why meal budgeting is important. And I think someone mentioned that it's so that you can also make sure that you're getting in a lot of nutritious foods. And I think that's sort of really the key topic for today. So eating well on a budget doesn't mean that that will stop you from eating healthily. So there's really sort of common misconception that eating healthy has to be expensive. And unfortunately, I think food marketing encourages this type of perception. And if you look at the sort of health food section at the grocery store, all you might see are sort of expensive activated nuts or sort of healthy diet formulations, which are usually sort of just really highly processed and cleverly marketed. So I think what I hopefully will sort of convey to you today is that healthy eating doesn't have to be that expensive. And in fact, there's also some research to back this up, which I'll cover in a little bit. But I think at its core, eating well on a budget is about knowledge and preparation. And hopefully I'll be able to provide a little bit of guidance on this topic today. Okay, so I thought I would just bring it back firstly to what healthy eating really looks like. And I thought a good place to start is to look at the dietary guidelines. So dietary guidelines are based on sort of the latest scientific evidence for meeting our nutritional needs, and increasingly on how to prevent chronic illnesses such as cancer, diabetes, cardiorespiratory diseases, and so on. According to the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, there are over 100 nations in the world that have food-based dietary guidelines. And these sort of country-specific guidelines usually provide culturally appropriate evidence-based recommendations on healthy diets, and these are developed sort of according to current needs, food availability, and to the particular eating habits of a country. By and large, though, they emphasize the same things. So this is to consume a wide variety of fresh foods, whole foods, including fruit, vegetables, whole grains, and legumes, and to limit the intake of sugar, fat, and salt consumption, ideally. So on the screen is an example of the Australian dietary guidelines, and they emphasize eating a wide variety of foods from the 5 sort of core food groups, which are your fruits, vegetables, whole grains, your proteins such as meat, poultry, fish, eggs, nuts and seeds, as well as your dairy. It also encourages limiting the intake of discretionary foods. So these are your sweets, your fast foods, sugary drinks, even diet sodas. So that's sort of, you want to sort of minimize the intake of this. And the number of serves that are recommended for each food group vary between age and sex. So if you're interested in finding out a little bit more, I would really encourage you to jump on this link. This really has a lot of information, and you can sort of tailor it to your needs. Okay, so we know that eating well is really important for maintaining our physical health, but there's also a growing evidence that it could benefit our mental health and also our brain health. So this new area of research, which I sort of alluded to already before, this is called nutritional psychiatry, and that's sort of studying the connection between dietary factors and mental health. So there's really a growing evidence base around the foods that seem to be protective for our mental health and for the health of our brain, and the ones that could be potentially detrimental. And on the screen, I just have some examples of really prominent books by leading researchers in this field. So if you're interested, I would really sort of encourage you to start here. And I guess, although the mechanisms behind how diet influences our mental health and brain are only sort of beginning to be understood, there are a few particular areas of focus that are starting to grow a really solid evidence base. And I thought I would cover that one area today, which is the gut microbiota. So for anyone that hasn't heard of the gut microbiota, this refers to an ecosystem of trillions of microorganisms that are lining the gastrointestinal tract. So these are mainly bacteria, but there are also viruses, fungi, archaea, and protozoa. I should mention that you also have microorganisms on your skin, in your mouth, and other areas of the body, but sort of the highest concentration of these bugs are in your gut. And that's something that's really important to realize, is that most of these microorganisms are commensal, so that means they're not harmful to our existence. But even more importantly, many of them also form a mutualistic or symbiotic relationship with the host, in other words, us, where we benefit from each other. So the gut microbiota is important for some key functions in the body. So it helps with digestion and metabolism. It actually helps to regulate our immune system, and it's also involved in gut-to-brain communication. So for instance, there are bacteria that influence the production of neurotransmitters. And these are messages that are carried from the gut to the brain, and these can actually influence our mood. But there are also other pathways through which the gut microbiota can influence gut-to-brain signaling, such as through the vagus nerve and through gut hormone signaling as well. So there are a lot of pathways that are sort of thought to be involved. And a key note here is that the gut microbiota is directly influenced by our diet, so directly influenced by what we eat. So the key is that the type of food will determine the types of bacteria that grow. So by and large, gut microbes prefer to feed off of fiber. So they help to break down plant fibers that we as humans aren't able to digest. And then these plant fibers can selectively stimulate the growth or activity of favorable bacteria. And these are called prebiotics. And these actually can result in the production of beneficial metabolites, such as short-chain fatty acids, which are beneficial for maintaining our gut and overall health. And we can get fiber from a number of different sources, so your vegetables, fruits, whole grains, legumes, nuts, and seeds. And the important thing to note is that at the moment, there's not really any strong consensus on whether one type of fiber is more or less beneficial than another type. But what we do know is that it's important to have as many varied sources of fiber in your diet as possible, because this means you're essentially feeding a diverse array of microbes that could carry out many important functions in the body. And essentially this leads to a more balanced and resilient and diverse gut microbiota. So instead of sort of just sticking to eating apples every day, it could be good to sort of branch out and try different types of fruits and different types of vegetables. So yeah, the variety is really what you want to aim for if you want to maintain a really diverse and healthy microbiome. And in terms of actually feeding our gut, so prebiotics are more important because they serve as the direct source of food that the bacteria feed off. But you may also have heard of probiotics and sort of their health benefits. So you could think of things such as lactobacillus found in yogurt. But I did want to just sort of note that at the moment, the evidence around probiotic supplements and whether they are beneficial long-term is still sort of being researched. It's really not that clear yet. And that's because our microbiota are highly individualized. So everyone's microbiota are really different. And so having just sort of one supplement that's able to tailor to everyone is not really that feasible. But yeah, if you are interested in introducing some probiotics into your diet, I would probably suggest starting with actual foods that you can introduce, such as your yogurts, your kefir, kombucha, sauerkraut, and miso are really good places to start. And just something I wanted to touch on briefly before moving on. So our understanding around how the gut microbiota might relate to our mental health is sort of continuing to grow, but we also now really know that the diet is sort of a key modulator of our gut microbiota. And so now a lot of research is trying to understand how these three factors relate to one another. So for instance, could our diet be strengthening or weakening the interaction between our gut microbes and our brain and mental health, as shown in the first triangle here, or could our diet be directly changing the composition and function of the gut microbiota to then influence brain processing and in turn our mental health, such as shown in the triangle, in the second triangle. So these questions are only now beginning to be addressed, and this is something that I'm hoping to be able to explore in my PhD. But I would say this is still, quite a new area of focus. On the other hand, the link between sort of our diet and mental health is a little bit stronger. So there are some early indications around the effects that dietary interventions might have on psychological outcomes. And I wanted to focus on this particular dietary intervention called SMILES for short. So this stands for Supporting the Modification of Lifestyle in Lowered Emotional States. And this was a dietary intervention that was actually based in South Australia, which tested the efficacy of a dietary program for the treatment of clinically diagnosed depression in comparison to a control group, which was based on social support. And so this dietary program provided personalized dietary advice and nutritional counseling to support adherence to a modified Mediterranean diet. And this incorporated recommendations from the dietary guidelines for adults in Greece, as well as some key components from the Australian dietary guidelines, so that this could be sort of relevant and easy to maintain for Australian participants. And I should also mention that if you're interested in the Mediterranean diet in general, this has a really quite a strong evidence base as well on its effects on mental health. And so this is, I think, why this study decided to sort of choose the Mediterranean diet as its model. And what they found was that after 12 weeks of adhering to this intervention, that the dietary support group led to much greater improvements in mental health compared to the control groups. So on this figure, on the y-axis, you have symptoms of depression, and you'll notice that the diet intervention from baseline to after 3 months really led to a really drastic reduction. And there was also a reduction in the social support group, but not as great as in the dietary intervention group. And there were also 32% of participants who went to achieve full remission, so meaning that they were no longer considered depressed, compared to 8% in the social support group. And there was no change in weight in either of the groups, because there's also evidence showing that there's association between weight status and mental health, but that was independent of any changes in weight. And so that was sort of some pretty interesting and exciting evidence that this really could have benefits for your mental health. And something else that's really key is that the researchers from this intervention conducted a detailed cost analysis of 20 participants before and after the dietary changes, just to estimate the affordability of adhering to a healthier diet. And the results showed that the healthy diet actually cost less than the low quality diet that most participants were sort of adhering to before the intervention. So before the dietary change, participants on average spent around $138 Australian dollars on food and beverages per week. And in contrast, the recommended modified Mediterranean diet cost around 112 Australian dollars per week, which meant a saving of $26 per week per person. The only caveat being that the costing was conducted in a sort of a metropolitan area of Australia, so the results might not necessarily sort of apply to other areas of Australia or other areas of the world. But despite this, the results are quite encouraging in showing that the kind of outcomes for eating well on a budget are definitely feasible. And for the second point, compared to the treatment based on social support, so the control intervention, they found that the dietary treatment was actually really cost effective. So on average, there was an approximate $3,000 cost saving per participant in the dietary intervention group. And this difference they found was due to the lower costs of healthcare, as the people in the dietary group had fewer visits to allied and other health professionals. And they also lost less time out of roles such as domestic duties or, not being able to go to work. So there was, kind of pretty significant saving in money for the dietary intervention group. So now I'm going to really sort of go more into some practical tips on how to eat well on a budget. And there are a lot of really great courses and resources online at the moment, which can teach you how to eat well on a budget and sort of how to budget in general. I'd like to highlight the budgeting webinar that Jessie ran a few weeks ago, which was really informative. So there's sort of a lot of really great content out there, and oftentimes free as well. I wanted to just highlight a Deacon course that I completed recently myself, which was called Food and Mood Improving Mental Health Through Diet and Nutrition. And this is sort of really up my alley, really closely in line with what I'm researching. So I found it really interesting. And as part of that course, they shared some really practical tips on how to eat well on a budget. And I thought these were really informative and worth sharing here. And the kind of key message that I learned is that simple sort of achievable changes are the best way to ensure long-term sustainable changes. And so if you're sort of new to this concept of budgeting your meals, something that's quite easy sort of to kind of get yourself into this mind frame is to think that your meals and snack options don't necessarily have to require a lot of prep and a lot of cooking. So you can really opt for pre-prepared portion meals. You can also sort of defer to getting things that are canned. So there are a lot of sort of fish, legumes, frozen veggies, pre-cut salads, pre-cooked grains that you can get at the grocery store. And something I wanted to note as well, which maybe not many people know, is that frozen veggies and also canned and tinned vegetables and even fruits, nutritionally speaking, they're comparable to fresh produce, but often much times much sort of more affordable. And what I do is often I stock up on frozen berries myself. They're much cheaper, but just as good, and they obviously last much longer. So that's somewhere that I sort of started when I wanted to budget my meals a little bit more. And takeaway is also an option. So takeaways can be healthy, and they can often also be affordable if you know where to look. So there can be sandwiches, salad, rolls and wraps, even sushi, soups, rice paper rolls. Oftentimes you can find them in places such as markets and other sort of convenience stores where they're not necessarily that expensive, and they also don't have to be unhealthy. And sort of limiting the salty fried foods as much as possible is what I would recommend. And then some sort of really practical tips that I wanted to go through one by one. So a good place to start is cooking at home. And I know that's something that was brought up in the chat earlier before. Cooking at home can be a little bit maybe intimidating if you're not really used to doing this and you're sort of used to eating out or having meals cooked for you. But this is probably sort of the number one tip to eating well on a budget. And I think nowadays it's really easy to sort of get resources on how to get yourself comfortable with kind of honing in on your cooking skills. There are a lot of videos online teaching you how to sort of practical steps on how to kind of get familiar with different culinary techniques. And I think doing this with friends as well, maybe that are a little bit more experienced and sort of getting them to help you is a good way to start. And there are some really sort of easy base recipes that you can start with. And another tip is to organize your fridge and pantry as much as possible. So knowing what you have already, knowing what's about to sort of expire is really important. So you're not constantly getting new ingredients and sort of wasting things. So a good place to start is by organizing your fridge and pantry. And something that I really like to do as well is to buy extra non-perishable items when I'm going on a grocery trip. So these are your canned veggies and fruits, your frozen ingredients, and that's something just you can keep at home at any time. And then if you sort of comes down to cooking a meal and you think you're out of ingredients, if you actually open up your pantry, you'll probably see that you have actually some base ingredients that you can work with. So it's good to have some non-perishable items to stock up on. And another great tip when you are cooking at home is to make an extra portion that you can freeze later. So if you make a large meal and you don't think you can eat that sort of within a few days, just chuck it in the freezer and it's going to last for well up to a few months. And like I mentioned before, the nutrient content isn't going to change, so it's going to be just as nutritious and it's going to be just as tasty if you heat it up in sort of the right ways. Another great tip is to plan your meals and make some grocery lists. So I know that someone mentioned as well in the chat, sort of planning out your meals ahead for the week really will stop you from sort of having that midweek sort of crisis where you don't know what to eat and you're going to sort of reach to your Uber Eats. But if you have a sort of a plan of all the different meals for each day, then you're going to stick to that more likely going to stick to that. So it's really good to have a meal planner, and also having a grocery list will ensure that you sort of just stick to what's sort of on that list, and you're going to buy unnecessary things, unnecessary snacks that's going to sort of increase that food bill. So it's really great to have a bit of a plan around your meals. And aiming to buy only the items on your grocery list. So that's sort of in line with the previous point. If you have a strict budget and a strict list of things that you need, you're going to be much more likely to stick to that. And another great tip, I think, is to buy produce that's in season and to look for specials. So with fruits and vegetables, they're going to be in season sort of different periods throughout the year. So it's good to sort of be familiar with what's in season and buy that when you can. And of course, going to local markets will usually kind of lead to better deals. So if you can, planning your trips to markets might be a good place to start as well. And if you do buy fresh produce in season, you could also just freeze that for later. So if there's sort of a really good deal, you could buy these things in bulk, which usually will be cheaper, and then put that in the freezer, and that's going to last you for a month down the track. Another great tip, I think, is that a lot of products that are sort of placed at your eye line tend to be more expensive, whereas products that are placed on the lower or upper shelves are usually much cheaper, but they're not worse in quality usually. So if you are kind of concerned, you can look at the nutrition labels on the back, but oftentimes you'll find that they are almost identical, but it's just that sort of the items at eye level are marketed more effectively, I'd say, and then they can bump that price up. And another great tip is to organize shopping in cooking groups. So if you have a lot of friends, like I said before, that might be a little bit more experienced with cooking, maybe you can sort of join together and do some cooking sessions together, and also buy groceries together. If you buy groceries in bulk together, then you can all sort of save a little bit each. You can divide those costs up. And it's also about sort of exchanging knowledge and skills and having a little bit of fun with it. So if you're new to cooking, it might be a little bit intimidating, but if you do this with a friend or a relative, it can be a little bit more fun. It doesn't have to be as scary. So I hope, that these are some good tips to sort of get started if you don't know where to kind of get your foot in the door with these budgeting tips. And I thought I wanted to kind of share a list of pantry staples that I like to have in place. So what I like to have on hand are these sort of non-perishable items. So your cooking oils and butters, condiments, and sort of salt and pepper. These dried beans and lentils are really great. They will last you for a really long time. And if you decide to make a stew or a soup, you can sort of just pop into your pantry and use these ingredients. You can also have some vegetables that aren't going to spoil as quickly. So potatoes and sweet potatoes are going to last much longer. And again, your canned and frozen vegetables is something that I really like to have on hand at all times. And then something that I would buy on a more of a weekly basis are grains and seasonal produce, as well as some greens. And then, of course, meats you'd want to buy fresh and sort of use that up in a more timely manner. So ground beef and chicken are usually more cheap, so that's a good place to start. And then the things that are going to perish more quickly, like eggs and yogurt, you'd also want to buy more on a weekly basis. And if you can, trying to avoid getting convenience snacks, prepackaged meals and fast foods, and sort of just making this more of a treat as opposed to sort of eating this on an ongoing basis. And this is not my pantry, but these are sort of pantry goals, something that I want to aspire to. So having an organized pantry, I think, can be really motivating to cook if you kind of know what you already have on hand, and making it as easy as possible for yourself. I think that can really make it much easier to get into the habit of cooking more regularly if you sort of organize your kitchen and your pantry. And I thought I would sort of end by sharing some meal ideas that I personally really enjoy having on a very regular basis. So at the moment, I bolded oats with berries and nuts because that's basically what I eat every single day for brekkie. But the great thing with oats is that you can really change it up and sort of change around the fruits or the sort of other things that you top it with to keep it a little bit interesting. So as an example here, I've got some oats with frozen blueberries and some nuts or almonds, and I sprinkle a little bit of cinnamon on this just to give it a little bit of flavor. And you can use milk or soy milk or almond milk, whatever you prefer. And it's really quick and easy, and I calculated this to be around $1.50 per serve. And if you contrast that to a brunch place, usually porridges are up to like $10. So if you sort of realize how much more you are paying for this when you're going out, I think it's sort of quite obvious that eating at home can be sort of really cost saving and oftentimes just as delicious. And really doesn't take me long. This takes me about maybe 2 minutes to make. Just pop it in the microwave and it's done really quick. Then in sort of summertime, I really like to eat fruit. So this is papaya with Greek yogurt, and again with either nuts or seeds, just for some extra protein and healthy fats. And that's sort of, yeah, really tasty and something I look forward to. But another great option for breakfast is to have, say, multi-grain toast with eggs or baked beans or whatever condiments you like. These are going to be really nutritious and quick and easy, and really don't have to cost a lot at all. Then for lunch, what I like oftentimes, especially if I'm going to uni, but also at home, it's really convenient to have, say, sandwiches or wraps. So you can get some really great whole wheat wraps at Coles, and also multi-grain toast. And what's really great with this as well, if you don't think you'll be able to sort of get through a whole loaf of bread, you can freeze it, and it actually freezes really well, and it doesn't become soggy when you unfreeze it, which I like. And then you can sort of switch around the fillings, again, to keep it a little bit interesting. So I like to opt with tinned tuna, butcher meat. If you can, try to opt for the low sodium, the minimally processed options. And if you are sort of more plant-based, tofu and falafel is also a really great option. And then I like to add some salads and healthy spreads to make it a little bit tasty. So for example, you can opt for hummus or tzatziki. But if you like something a little bit lighter, also just a fresh salad, something really quick and easy. So this is an example of just some steamed veggies that I had, as well as just some fresh veggies that I combined with a little bit of meat. So this was a bit of a pork cutlet, and that also probably took under 10 minutes to make, and also really wasn't expensive at all. And some additional meal ideas for dinner. So I thought I would actually kind of show you the price breakdown of this veggie pasta. So about 500 grams of pasta is only $1 to $2, and that's even if you want to get the sort of the whole wheat pasta, the whole grain pasta. And then veggies, a whole bunch of veggies will probably cost you under $5, especially if you go to market or if you sort of look for specials and deals. And then a tin of tomatoes is 80 cents. If you wanted to get a couple of tins to make a bigger batch, the sort of portions will probably come out to be about $2 or even less. So I think, yeah, if you sort of keep in mind that a lot of fresh produce actually really isn't that expensive, you'll sort of be confident in knowing that this sort of healthy eating at home really isn't that pricey at all. And some other ideas for dinners, your curries, stir fries, soups and stews, pastas like I mentioned, as well as having some roast vegetables. I actually wanted to also just highlight this salmon and soba noodle meal that I made a few weeks ago. So I think maybe a lot of people also think that seafood can be a little bit pricier, but this meal came out to be about $6 per portion. So if you compare that to, say, a fillet of fish at McDonald's, I think, which is about $7, I think the sort of price difference, is quite staggering. Getting a small burger is actually more expensive than having a really nutritious and well-balanced meal. You can also get frozen fish, which are usually cheaper as well. So there are really a lot of great options out there. And I hope that I sort of inspired you a little bit. It's really great also, you can sort of play around with the ingredients that you use. So if you're doing, say, roast veggies, you could opt for trying different types of vegetables. What I said before about sort of variety being key in the types of plant fibers that you introduce in your diet. So sort of circulating and sort of playing around with the different types of vegetables that you introduce into your meals will not only keep the meals a little bit more interesting, but also ensure that you're sort of getting the varied fibers into your diet. I think I'll leave it there for today. If you want to get in touch with me about sort of any of the topics that were discussed, if you have any follow-up questions, please feel free. I'd love to talk to you more about this. I'm also actually working on a blog at the moment, which will be sort of around my research interests. I'm going to be posting sort of some ideas about the latest research, and I also want to sort of get into sharing my own recipes and meal ideas. So if you're interested, feel free to get in touch about that. So it's sort of currently in the works, but hopefully something I'll be able to introduce in the coming months. That's all from me.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that, Djamila.
No worries.
I thought that was fantastic. I learned so much out of that that I didn't know, and I never thought was important until now that you've shown it. I'm like, oh, maybe I should be looking into this a little bit more and paying a bit closer attention. Now, as we mentioned, for anyone that's online, we do have Q&A. So if you have any questions you would like to ask Djamila, please pop them in the chat now. You can send them through privately if you don't want everyone to see it, or you can pop it in publicly. We have had one come in, which is just a little fun one, Djamila, is someone's asked, what's your favorite breakfast, lunch and dinner item?
My favorite breakfast, lunch and dinner? So I think the oats. Like I was saying, I'm not sure if that's going to be my favorite, maybe like 6 months down the line. Maybe I will get a little bit sick of that because I literally have been eating it every single day. But because, you can swap around what you put in. If you get sick of your berries, put in a banana. If you get sick of sort of the almonds, just opt in for something a little bit different. You could add some nut butter as well. So I think the fact that you can sort of really play around with the ingredients makes it a little bit interesting. For lunch, I really like having a falafel wrap. I think it's so delicious and so easy and quick. And for dinner, probably the salmon is my favorite. I'm really big fan of salmon, and the soba noodles I got at a Japanese store. Also not too expensive, lasted 4 meals. So that particular dish that I made lasted for 4 meals. So really delicious and really quick. So I think those would be my 3 favorites.
Okay. And while we're on that, then I guess I want to add one more. So that's your breakfast, lunch and dinner. Now, we all know that none of us are good at being healthy 100% of the time. So let us in on a secret. What's your go-to dessert or little naughty treat that you have? So
I'm a huge fan of chocolate. I like anything chocolate flavored or anything that has chocolate in it. I love tiramisu. In terms of savory things, also, huge fan of burgers and pizza. I think it's normal to have those cravings, and I think another thing that's important to know is that it's impossible to eat healthily all the time, nor should you have that expectation for yourself. A great rule that I learned was to sort of eat as healthily as you can about 80% of the time, And then the rest, sort of the 20% of the remaining time, treat yourself to something that you really enjoy. It's also about the experience. But yeah, that sort of 80-20 rule, I think, is pretty good to stick to.
Okay, no, that's awesome. We've had another question come in, is one of the students has said, if I was on a budget of, say, $50 a week, how could I get the best protein into my diet?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think it depends sort of maybe the types of proteins that you're after. So of course, meat-based, so animal meat-based proteins are of course going to be a little bit more expensive. So if you're not fussed about the types of proteins that you want to introduce, I would say that having more plant-based proteins are going to be more sort of friendly on your budget, but also just as nutritious. So your legumes, your beans, even things like grains. I think maybe not everyone's sort of aware, but quinoa is a really great source of protein, a little bit more expensive though. So having those legumes, so your beans and even like seeds and nuts is a really good place to start to get a little bit more protein in. Tofu is also a really great source of protein and usually quite inexpensive, especially at Asian markets, for example. They can be a little bit cheaper than at your Coles or Woolies. And in terms of animal-derived proteins, ground meats usually are cheaper. You can also opt for things like tinned tunas or salmon, also not too expensive, a really great source of omega-3s as well, obviously. So that's something to consider. And you could also always look for specials on meats. So if you are after animal meats, you could look for specials and maybe buy a little bit in bulk, and then you could just freeze whatever you don't use. And that's also a really good way of sort of saving on that.
No, that's perfect.
Yeah, and just seeing the other question. Yeah, so that's it.
Just for those that aren't seeing, I might just quickly say it in case people haven't seen the chat. So another question has come through. Someone said, and I can relate to this, Djamila, so much, is I suck at cooking. So how should I get started?
Yeah, I also really thought, and I don't think I'm that great at cooking. And it's quite intimidating if you're sort of really used to having meals cooked for you, prepared for you, or sort of really relying on takeaway. But I think a really good place to start, where I sort of started, is to use the oven. The oven is actually my best friend when it comes to making dinners especially. So I really like making roast veggies. So I just chop up roast veggies, of course, cook sort of cutting, and that's also a sort of a skill that you have to develop. You want to make sure you're doing it safely. But if you sort of can cook up and sort of cut up some roast veggies, just pop that onto a tray, and then combine that with, if you do like to eat meat, just some like a salmon or like a pork cutlet or some other sort of meats. You can put that all onto just the one tray and just pop it into the oven and just forget about it. And actually cooking in the oven is probably going to sort of maximize the nutrients that you can have in your food. So frying, usually you lose a little bit more nutrients that way, but oven-based cooking is probably ideal for that. And it's really easy because you can just step away. You don't have to worry about it. You just put on the timer and let it just roast away. And I like to sort of drizzle some olive oil on there as well, especially if you're cooking foods that have a lot of sort of fat-soluble vitamins, like your pumpkins or your other sort of carrots and sweet potatoes. That olive oil will really help also sort of getting the most vitamins out of that. And yeah, that's it. You just sort of pop that in and then forget about it, and it's done. Your meal is ready. And that's sort of what I really like to do when I'm feeling especially lazy as well.
I love that. And I just want to add, though, to stick with our insurance policy and make sure we're safe, please don't forget about your oven.
Yes, don't forget about your oven.
Make sure you set a timer, though, and come back and check it. But no, I love the idea of using the oven. I know, for one, I've never really been one to use the oven because I guess I don't know how to cook it. So I've always been cautious.
Yeah.
And I always thought things are better if you cook it in a fry pan or on a stove.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a good point that I actually might take on board and
Yeah.
try the oven, and
I
hopefully
know.
not forget about it.
I know air fryers are really popular as well nowadays, and they're pretty much the same as an oven. So if you already have an air fryer, that's also great. It's essentially just a mini oven, and it does the same thing. Yeah.
That's awesome. Okay. I love that. Look, thank you so much for all that, Djamila. That has been super helpful. I know even just for myself personally. So I'm sure our guests got a whole bunch of great information out of that. So what I might do is I might flick back onto my screen just to wrap up
Sure.
today's session. So in addition to the beautiful skills and knowledge that you all just got from Djamila, we do also have some amazing services that are available through the university. If it's not just food, or if it's not budgeting that you're struggling with, but it might be other areas. Some of those services are places like CAPS, which is our counselling and psychological services. They are free to all students. So if you are struggling, or if this session has brought up some touchy points, or you're a bit emotional about things, please make sure that you reach out to them and utilize that service. It is completely free for all University of Melbourne students and staff. On top of that, if it's things relating to health service, and Djamila might have given you some information about gut and health and getting the nutrients you need. So if you find you're struggling with your health, or if you find you're struggling with some of this, by all means, make sure you reach out to health services and get some support through the uni health service that you can get. And again, it's worth doing and utilizing to make sure that you're in the right frame of mind and you're healthy enough going forward as well. Other services available like chaplaincy, university accommodation, housing, safer communities. There is financial aid too. So if you're really struggling, you can't afford to buy food, you can't afford to pay your rent, stuff like that, we do have financial services available. One of our amazing colleagues, Kate, helped out in the last session around what financial services are available through the uni, and short-term loans and long-term loans. So please make sure that you jump on to YouTube if you didn't attend that session, and have a look through and learn some of those skills, and also find out some of those contacts to help you. There is also a range of community-based food pantries. There's also the free fruit and veg boxes that the university runs. There's a whole bunch of services available to support you as students. So please reach out to them. That's what we're here to help you for. Lastly, if you need to get in contact with any of these services through the uni and you're not sure, please reach out to your student services. They will be able to direct you or provide contact details. So you can contact them through the UniMel website. There's a frequently asked questions section on there, which covers a lot of the knowledge and info that you'll need. You can also give them a call Monday to Friday on the 13 Mel number. They'll be able to, again, chat with you over the phone and provide some info. For those of you that are based in Melbourne after lockdown, you're more than welcome to come visit the team in person at either the Parkville or South Bank campus at the Stop One. And again, more than happy to help work with you and provide any resources and information. That sort of brings us to the end of it. I just want to reiterate the counselling services. If you need support, if you're struggling, or if this has brought up any emotions that you're not comfortable with, please reach out to them on the contact details provided. They'll be more than happy to chat with you and be there for you. So again, Djamila, if you want to pop back on to say a final goodbye, I do, on behalf of the Student Success team, would love to say a massive thank you for coming on today and helping us with this. The information you provided is absolutely outstanding, and it's good to see that you're so passionate and knowledgeable about this area. So I know that I'm personally grateful, and I'm sure all the students are, but I just want to hand over you to any final words.
Thank you. No, I'm just really grateful for the experience, and hopefully that was interesting, and we learned something new today. If you do want to get in touch, like I said, please feel free to do so. I'm a little bit sad that I didn't have the blog sort of up and running yet, because that would be sort of a really great place to refer you to, but hopefully sort of in the coming weeks, I'll be able to get that up and running. So if you're interested, please, do get in touch. I'm really, happy to keep sharing this information. It's really fun and really, yeah, really means a lot to me.
That's awesome. Look, thank you so much for that. And for everyone that joined in, thank you for today. Stay safe, look after yourselves, and we will see you all next week for Adulting 101 on communication. Awesome. Have a great week, everyone. Thanks all.
Bye.
Bye.